Yo, what's going on, guys? This is BrendanMushi, and today we're going to be going over the Guilty Gear Xrd storyline from the very start of Xrd all the way up to current. If you haven't seen my last video, definitely check it out. It goes over the complete story of Guilty Gear from the very first Guilty Gear game all the way up to Xrd. Once again, this is just a recap of the story following Soul Bad Guy, That Man, the Universal Will, and Justice. The Xrd story is literally hours and hours and hours worth of content, so I can't cover everything in just a small condensed video, but I can cover the main storyline and the important parts for you. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So the first thing I have to mention to you before getting into the Xrd story is there actually is a canon storyline between Guilty Gear 2 Overture, where we left off, and Guilty Gear Xrd, where we're starting now. And that is Guilty Gear Vastedge XT, which is a pachinko machine. Really, the only thing you need to know about the storyline in this game is that since the attack of the last Valentine in Guilty Gear 2 Overture, Soul thinks it would be a good time for him to prepare for the next Valentine attack, whenever that's going to be. So basically, Soul and Sin go on a search to look for another piece of the outrage, the thing that Soul created during the Crusades. He's specifically looking for the flashing fang, the part of it that amplifies and creates light magic. Soul finds out that it's in the possession of a Conclave member named Baldias. Soul and Sin show up at his hideout and they easily body him and take it back. He combines this with another piece of the outrage, the Fire Seal, in order to create the Junkyard Dog. But Soul isn't the only one that's preparing for the next Valentine attack. The United Nations deploys the development of these man-made machine soldiers referred to as the Opus, so that way if a Valentine attacks again, they'll have some soldiers ready to defend against it. And of course, just as everyone predicted, the next Valentine does show up. She goes by the name of Ramlethal Valentine, and she declares war on the entire world. これより全世界に宣戦布告する。あなた方出来損ないの人形どもはすべて根絶やしにする。未来を悲観しろ。 Sometime after Ramlethal declared war on the world, she has a meeting with the Conclave. I know, shocking, right? The shadowy Illuminati organization that founded the magic in the Guilty Gear universe is working side by side with Valentine, a creation of the Universal Will. The Conclave says that they want to create a new ideal world, and it's kind of unclear at this point if their version of an ideal world matches up with the Universal Will, since the Universal Will wants to destroy all humans and the Conclave are humans. But more on this later on. When Soul and Sin catch news of what Ramlethal is up to, they chase after her to go after the bounty and save the world. Meanwhile, Kai asks for permission from Leo to see if he can send Elfelt after Soul to help him out in defeating Ramlethal. You see, Elfelt is also a Valentine and the sister of Ramlethal. Around the time that Ramlethal declared war on the world, Elfelt showed up at Kai's doorstep saying that she wanted to stop her sister. Unlike Ramlethal and the previous Valentine before her, Elfelt actually has emotions and decided to betray the Universal Will and help humanity. Leo doesn't trust her, but Kai acts on his own anyway and sends Elfelt off to help Soul. Soul is eventually able to find Ramlethal and they begin fighting. Although Soul was able to defeat Ramlethal, she reveals to him that she was only a decoy and that elsewhere the Conclave would be enacting their plans as she distracted them. So basically, Ramlethal was just a distraction so that the Conclave could activate something called the Cradle in a city called Babylon. Activating the Cradle triggers a giant explosion of energy that wipes out every living being in the area. Once the explosion is finished, the Cradle completely vanishes without a trace. And you probably have some questions right now, such as, why is the Conclave teaming up with the Universal Will? What is the Cradle? Why did they unleash an explosion that killed everyone? And you know what? Those are completely valid questions, and at this point you're not supposed to know, but eventually those questions will be answered. As Soul and the others look off in the distance at the exploding Babylon and disappearing citizens, they wonder what the hell is going on, and before they can actually think of a reason, Ramlethal grabs Soul and attempts to self-destruct on him in order to kill him, which in all honesty is probably giving him major flashbacks. But before she can actually self-destruct, Elfelt appears and is able to stop Ramlethal from self-destructing, because Elfelt has the ability to restrict Ramlethal's powers as Ramlethal has the ability to restrict Elfelt's powers. This results in Ramlethal being captured for questioning as the group question if they can trust Elfelt, and they think of theories as to why the Conclave is doing what they're doing. Meanwhile, the mysterious and low-tier Bedman has an ominous conversation with a being that you can't quite see. I'm just going to tell you now for the sake of understanding the story, it's the Universal Will. The reason why we're being shown them is because the Universal Will is the one that's behind everything, and Bedman is the Universal Will's right-hand man. As Soul is more than ready to put Ramlethal in the dirt because she isn't talking, Sin tries to take a more wholesome approach to getting information out of her by showing her the finer things in life, such as burgers and puppies. Okay, so back to the plot. Elsewhere, Slayer, Zato, Milia, and Venom, who are a part of an assassin's guild, or, you know, some of them have left the guild, some of them rejoined the guild. The point is, all of them are associated with an assassin's guild. They all receive information that the Conclave is directly involved in everything that's been going on. And even though they're assassins and, you know, they might have killed a few people here and there in their line of work, they still don't want the world to end. They need to find someone they can trust to relay this information to, which is kind of hard because the Conclave has their eyes and ears everywhere. They control everything. They figure that Kai Kisuke would probably be the most trustworthy person to relay this information to. But before they can actually make their way to him, Bedman attempts to stop them.
イリュリア内でゆりかごの仕組みに感づいたものがいる。
想定より展開が早いね。確かにそれならばザトウに構っている暇も意味もない。
そう。ゆりかごの羽化だけは決して妨げられてはならない。
了解したよ。
So yeah, the Universal Will interrupts Bedman's fight to let him know that not only do the assassins know too much, but somebody in Illyria, which is Leo and Kai, also know too much and have discovered what's really going on behind the Conclave and the Cradle. Because of this, Bedman is told to retreat to deal with that issue. Soul, Kai, and Zato agree to meet in the nation of Zep, which is a nation that's not controlled by the UN or the Conclave, led by their leader Gabriel, who is also the commander of Potemkin. He reveals to them that the Cradle actually houses justice inside of it, and not only that, but the Cradle also has the Conclave inside of it. The Cradle is basically like a spaceship that the Conclave used to maneuver around the Guilty Gear world, and it also has justice inside of it. The Conclave's goal is to use justice to take over the world. Problem is that justice is currently dead because, you know, Soul Bad Guy killed her. And so essentially what the Conclave is trying to do is they're trying to bind a soul into Justice's body in order to revive Justice. The explosion that happens from the Cradle isn't actually an attack, it's just a byproduct that happens whenever the Cradle teleports. So the Conclave have been using the Cradle to teleport into the backyard to do some shit with the Universal Will and then come back to Earth. Every time it teleports, it blends in with the backyard and the surrounding area, and the dense energy causes it to wipe away anyone that's nearby. And their conversation would be cut short when once again Bedman shows up to stop them.
寝たままでは会話もままならないか。ならばとっておきの目覚ましをプレゼントしてやろう。
十分だ。頃合いだろ。
そうだね。 では移動するよ。
たわけが逃すわけがなかろう。
So Bedman is defeated and captured by Gabriel as Potemkin attempts to interrogate him, but Bedman goes into a dreamlike state, so he's unable to get any information out of him. So after everyone briefs once again with all the information they know, they find out that the Conclave can't stay in the backyard for long and they have to come to the real world to essentially get a breath of air. The idea is to wait for the Cradle to reappear again and attack it when it does. The only problem is the Cradle has this impenetrable force field around it, so they're going to need to find a way to break through it. So once again the Cradle appears and Soul's group attempts to attack it. Bedman shows up, so a lot of the Guilty Gear characters attempt to fend him off, while Soul and a very unlikely ally attempt to destroy the force field around the Cradle.
やはりてめえか。
フレデリック、今は作戦に集中して。
言われなくても。
Soul, with the help of that man, successfully breaks the force field around the cradle, which reveals Justice. At the last moment, the Conclave used their teleportation technique to teleport Justice into the backyard. Soul feels fully confident that he could wash them if he just let it take them into the backyard, because he feels like he could actually maintain fighting in the backyard for a period of time. But he'd be stopped by Elphel, as she felt that he had no way to get back into the human world, and while he would be able to fight there temporarily for a period of time, eventually he would die because he would be trapped there. Meanwhile, Bedman seals that man in an alternate dimension. Soul and them group up again once more to talk. It's revealed that Ramathal is actually starting to develop feelings and emotions, and essentially they understand the next step in the Conclave's plan. So in order to fuse one of the members of the Conclave with Justice, they need a large source of energy. In the Guilty Gear universe, there's this thing called St. Elmo's Fire. It's a giant bolt of lightning that strikes once every 13 years, and they're essentially waiting for that bolt to hit, and they want it to hit Justice to fuel it with enough power, so that way they can bind one of their souls to Justice and take over the world. Whew, I hope you're still with me. Anyway, so after one final meeting, they devise a plan to where Dizzy will overload the electronic systems by which Justice will attach to, in hopes that it will overload Justice's systems and prevent them from fusing. It's after they come up with this plan that the Conclave would appear with Justice waiting for St. Elmo's Fire to land. And you remember those totally not suspicious machine robot soldiers at the beginning of the story that the United Nations had set up in place at the beginning of the series in case of another Valentine attack? Yeah, so it turns out those were gears. And it's at this point in the story that those turn on the citizens and against the main characters of the Guilty Gear story.
ついに我々の勝利だ。見ているか、慈悲なき刑事よ。見ているか、ギアメーカーよ。貴様たちの要求はこれで満たされる。我々の手によってな。そして貴様らが何を考えよう。我々はもはや何者にも屈しない力を手に入れる。今だ。 これは異常なエネルギー量が流れ込んでくる。おのれパラダイム。
およしエルパラダイムとレオのおっさん。
やかましい。
エル、無事か？
待て！そいつは今までのエルフェルトじゃない！
So the Conclave's version of an ideal world was completely different from the Universal Will's ideal world, in that the Conclave wanted to control the current world using Justice's power, and they didn't give a fuck about the Universal Will or the Gearmaker. However, the Conclave was defeated, and just when you think everything is over, it's revealed that Elphelt was working for the Universal Will the entire time, although she was not aware of it. The reason why Elphelt was given emotions was so that she could be sent as a sleeper agent and pretend to be on Soul on the other side. And then when the right time came, the Universal Will would activate her. Part of the reason that Elphelt saved Soul when he was going to destroy Justice when it was teleporting was because part of her programming didn't want her to allow Soul to destroy Justice, because the Universal Will still needs Justice. You see, the Universal Will had everything planned the whole time and knew that the Conclave would fail, and everything that happened up to this point was part of the Universal Will's plan. As Elphelt and Justice are taken away by the Universal Will, you can see that Elphelt still has her original personality inside of her body as she reaches out to Ramathal and the rest of Soul's group who vow to go and save her. Meanwhile, the Sanctus Maximus Populi named Ariels gives a speech to her people. She's the most powerful person in the Guilty Gear universe, leading even the Conclave. She's always been known to be a benevolent and kind leader. However, people don't realize that she actually is the universal will. She used to be an actual normal human being, but sometime before the events of Exerd, the universal will manifested itself inside of her body and uses her body as an avatar. So the person who's been talking to Bedman the entire time has been her.
この世の人形どもを全て殺し、首をすげ替え、新たな人類を作るという信念がな。
それが本当の聖王アリエルス。いえ、慈悲なき啓示の本心なのね。
しかし安心しろ。お前は違う。ジャスティスと融合すれば完全な人間となる。あとはエネルギーが満ちるのを待つだけだ。お前のお友達がここに来られると思うのか？囚われの姫と、それを助けに来る王子様。
何してる？さっさと取り返しに行くぞ。これ以上は奪われてたまるか。
おはよう。予定よりちょっと早く起こしちゃったけど、調子はどう？頭も体もちょっとぼんやりしてるかな。外の空気を吸ってくるね。バイバイ。待て。
レイブ、ジャック王がばっくれた。うるせえの分かってるよ。私も後を追う。てめえも手を貸せ。
So basically, Jacko Valentine, a creation of that man, which is the other half of Arya's consciousness that man saved from justice, is awakened early by Ino, and because of this, she's a little bit incomplete, and that's why her personality can switch between that of a child and a mature woman. Jacko runs off from Ino, which prompts Ino to call Raven and let him know what's going on. Ino is actually able to catch up with Jacko before the others, and that's when Jacko explains to Ino exactly what she is. Jacko basically explains that sometimes an object can obtain a consciousness. Jacko basically tells Ino that during the Crusades, humanity's will to fight and see a brighter tomorrow converged on a single point in the backyard and gave birth to an organism. This organism would take on a human form known as a magical Foki or a witch, and that is Ino. Ino feels upset that she's just now learning this information, but Jacko reassures her that that man only wants the best for Ino and Raven and that there's a crucial reason why he didn't tell her. It's heavily hinted that Ino is incomplete or unawakened, and this might explain her hungry lust for power. After Jacko returns home, Raven scolds Jacko for telling Ino the truth before she was supposed to know. Jacko says there's a method to her madness and there was a reason why she left Ino and a reason why she told Ino the truth, and that she believes she did the right thing. Raven says while you might have done the right thing, that doesn't mean it was the best course of action. After Raven leaves, the other Jacko, who seems to be a backup copy or contingency plan to deal with Ino, can be heard in the background.
ハッピーケイオスはまだ完成していない。
万が一の時はイノの剣を優先するということか。
ハッピーケイオスか。それはいい。せっかくだからその名前使わせてもらう。
Before heading on his search out for Elfelt, Soul has a conversation with Axel, and where Axel tells him about a problem he's having. Basically, Axel has the ability to slip between timelines. He's originally from long ago in the past, but he's currently stuck in Soul and the other's current timeline. You see, he could choose to go into the past and live his old life with his girlfriend and friends, but if he does that, it would destroy the current timeline that he's in. So Axel is basically tasked with a decision to choose if he wants to stay in the current world with Soul and them, or go to his past life, destroying their world. While Soul and the others search for Elfelt, Dr. Faust and the extremely intelligent Zappa, yes that Zappa, attempt to warn everyone in Illyria about what's going on in Japan. You see, ever since the day when the Universal Will took control of justice and attempted to turn the citizens of Japan into antimatter gears, where that man was forced to override the controls and hit Japan with a gamma ray, that incident left a lot of the Japanese citizens with a disease. The way this disease works is that essentially when these Japanese citizens come into contact with a lot of energy from the backyard, they turn into antimatter gears. And this is a weapon that the Universal Will intends to use against humanity. Cronus, the leader of the Conclave's bum ass, is still alive. He pays a visit to that man and asks that man defeats the Universal Will once and for all. Suddenly, Soul and the others get a distress signal from Elfelt showing exactly where her location is. Everyone knows it's very obviously a trap. Ramlethal volunteers, as she said that she would be the one to save her sister. Ramlethal shows up, and of course it's a trap. The Universal Will actually left a child intentionally on the battlefield because they knew that Ramlethal's emotions would take over and that she would attempt to protect the child.
いつか私とエル、そしてシンと一緒に笑えると思って。
なんだよ急に。こんな時に話すことじゃないだろ。
見せたかったな。
ラム？
泣かなくていいの。ラムネザルは初めからこうなる予定だったんだ。失敗作だったから。
悪魔、お母さんは悪魔よ。
The next thing that happens after that is Cronus is able to free that man from the dimensional prison that Bedman put him in. Cronus and that man actually have a history together in that they both co-ed studied under the original. After the incident with Ramlethal, Soul and the others regroup, but they're confronted by that man who tells them that it's time to let them know of the truth. He explains to them that the Universal Will's goal is to merge Elfelt with justice in order to create the first actual perfect human being that will wipe out all the other fake human beings on Earth. He explains that this was always the goal, and that even back in Guilty Gear 2 Overture, the original Valentine was trying to achieve this goal as well. And that specifically the Universal Will's goal is to merge a Valentine with justice. He then explains the true meaning behind what the absolute world actually is. So in the backyard, all of the information that's contained within the backyard can be defined as one of two informational bodies, Adam or Eve. And these two basically function as the yin and yang or core to the entire backyard. Adam and Eve are located in the backyard and they will often flicker one at a time. But should Adam and Eve ever appear at the same exact time, at that exact moment for just an instance, the real world and the backyard will blend for just a moment, causing an extinction. He explains that this is literally the cause of what killed the dinosaurs. More specifically, it will kill anything that can't handle the pressure of the backyard, which the Universal Will would deem as an inferior human. But what gets even crazier than that is he explains what actually created the Universal Will, and what actually created it was the original himself.
僕の死である第一の男は再び絶対確定世界が起こらないようにアダムとイブをそれぞれ2つの種に封じ込めた。
種だと。
一つをユノの天秤と名付け、そしてもう一つを
背徳の炎と呼んだ。
なんだって。ということは、それがギア細胞の起源か。
待て、誰がこんな神話を聞かせろと言った。慈悲なき刑事はなぜそんなに人間を作りたいんだ。
そうだね。それじゃあ昔話をしよう。ある男の現在を。
かつてまだこの世界に魔法がなかった時代、 一人の賢者が異世界バックヤードを発見した。バックヤードは神羅万象を司り、この世の真理を知ることも世界を思いのままに作り変えることもできる場所だった。賢者はその場所から一つの夢が叶うと考えた。それは人類の幸福。それが永遠に続くことである。賢者はその方法を探るため、一体のロボットを作った。与えられた使命は人類の揺らぐことのない幸福、その方法を探すこと。また、いかなる結論を出したとしても、人間を傷つけないこと。この使命に従い、ロボットは膨大な学習を始めた。しかし、ある時、一つの疑問にぶつかってしまった。人間とは何であるか。学習を重ねるたび、人間が複雑な存在だと知ったロボットは、完全に定義することを諦め、結論を得ないまま自ら解釈を作り出した。この世界にまだ人間はいない。この日を境に、彼の目的は魂を持つ者、不変の衝動を司る真の人類を作ることになった。そして同時に、現人類は守るべき対象ではなくなった。
That man continues to spoil the entire series for Soul and explains to him the reasoning behind everything he did that I explained in the first video. Soul retaliates as he's finding it extremely hard to believe that the person he was hellbent on killing had actually been helping him and trying to do the right thing the entire time. Soul yells at that man, letting him know that he killed Arya, as Jack-O chimes in saying that Arya is not dead and in fact she can actually be brought back to life. Jack-O is a Valentine that was created by that man using the other half of Arya's consciousness that he took from Justice. That man's goal is to take Jack-O, half of Arya's consciousness, and fuse it with Justice, thus creating Arya whole again. If they did this, Arya would actually come back as a human, not as a gear. And Soul is of course processing this information just about as good as you could guess. That man explains that in order to complete the process of fusing Jack-O with Justice, he'll need an immense amount of energy. He explains that he'll use Saint Ontario, which is basically a dangerous magical spell that has an immense amount of power. Leo and Kai confront the Sanctus Maximus Populi while she's on the job, and she no longer can keep up the act and immediately starts attacking everyone and summoning gears to attack Illyria. So naturally, everybody just start boxing. Elsewhere, Venom takes it upon himself to rematch Bedman, even though he washed all three of the assassins at the same time last time. But this time he's hired Robo-Kai for help because Bedman is able to read people's movements, but because Robo-Kai is a robot, he won't be able to read his movements. Robo-Kai is pushed to the point where he has to use a move to sacrifice himself in order to defeat Bedman.
人はつながれる。だから。いっぺん反省してこい。
The Universal Will visits Bedman while he's dying on the ground, and she explains to him that he was simply a pawn and that she had planned for him to die the entire time. Bedman thought that the absolute world was a dream world where anyone's dreams could come true. He thought that everyone he killed would be revived and be able to live all of their dreams, which is why he did everything that he did. The only thing Bedman ever wanted was to be able to see his sister again.
何人殺したと思っているんだ。僕を裏切ったら罪。
The Universal Will leaves and goes back to Elfelt in order to enact her plans to fuse her with Justice. Soul and the others are traveling through airship on their way to the Universal Will to save Elfelt, and while on the way they discuss that technically, since Dizzy is Justice's daughter and Soul and Justice are lovers because it's Arya, then that means Dizzy is Soul's daughter, which means Sin is Soul's grandson, which means that Soul is Kai's father-in-law. Soul and the others arrive via airship and let Elfelt know that they're there to rescue her. Meanwhile, Jacko goes up to where Elfelt is and attempts to switch places so that she can fuse instead of her. Soul and Kai have a fight with the Universal Will in order to prevent her from stopping Jacko. Jacko gets in position and ready for the St. Ontario beam to be fired at her so that way she can properly fuse with Justice. However, just before they can do that, the footholds that are holding Justice begin to break and Justice begins to fall. If they were to fire the beam now, the beam would miss. Sin and Kai attempt to hold Justice up straight but are struggling to do so.
諦めないで。
ラムレザル、バカだ。ラム、お前どうして。
とにかく持ち上げて。
ターゲット修正完了。
残念。ソルは生かしてつがいを作りたかった。
The St. Ontario beam is fired as the Universal Will attempts to block it from hitting Jacko.
気が落ちるぜ。
So, like, you know that whole plan that they had, you know, where the St. Ontario would hit Justice and then they would fuse and everything would be great. So, there's a slight problem. So part of Arya's consciousness does not want to fuse with Justice because she's still traumatized from the time that that man made her blow up Japan, so she's rejecting the fuse. Jacko says that she can override this, but she's going to need even more power than the St. Ontario blast. That man says there's no way he could possibly produce more power than that, and the Third King Daryl gives up and says, fuck this, I'm blowing Justice the fuck up because this is a failure. Soul immediately requests that Dr. Paradigm fire the St. Ontario at him. He wants it to hit his junkyard dog so that way he can use its abilities to amplify it and then hit Justice with it. Even though this plan is crazy, it just might work, but it doesn't seem like they'll have enough time to do it as Daryl's cannons are just about to fire.
Hehe, すごいっしょ。この一体の時間を圧縮しちゃいました。
なんて野郎だ。
ここで起きることは全て一瞬だ。旦那が変身しても世界に異変が起きる前に決着がつけられるかもしれない。ぶちかわせ旦那。
上等だアクセルをいっぱい怒らせろ。
それ
娘たちを頼む。今となっては私が唯一この世に残せるものだ。
What?
消えました。やっぱり親父は無敵だぜ。
フレデリック、これで危機は本当に去った。ありがとう。アリアは君に任せた。だからあとは僕たちの決着だけだね。
は？え？なんでだよ。もう二人が喧嘩する理由なんてねえだろ。
確かにもうギアメーカーもあの男もこの世界には必要なくなった。
シン、よく見ておけ。あれが男の目だ。喧嘩を売る野郎の目だ。ああいう目をした奴には理由なんかいらねえ。答えてやるのが筋なんだよ。俺が売られた。いいだろ、アスカー・アル・クロイツ。その喧嘩買ってやる。
Alright guys, well that's it. If you made it this far, congratulations. You now know the full Guilty Gear main storyline from start all the way to current and are ready for Strive. And I want to thank you guys so much for the support on this on my last video. It was because you asked for this video that I actually made this video, because I saw so many comments where people had requested a part 2. And I enjoy making videos like these, whether they're story related videos, tech, tutorials, news. As long as they're fighting game related in general, I'll be happy to make them. So if there's anything else you guys would like to see from me, definitely don't hesitate to let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.